Hello, and welcome to What is Innovation, the podcast that explores the reality of a word in danger of losing its meaning altogether. I'm your host, Jared Simmons, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Shawn Nelson today. Shawn founded Lovesac in 1998 and is currently serving as Chief Executive Officer of the company and a member of the Board of Directors. Mr. Nelson is the lead designer of the company's patented products and leads sourcing, creative design, public relations, investor relations, and culture. In 2005, he won Richard Branson's The Rebel Billionaire on Fox and continues to participate in ongoing TV appearances. He holds a master's degree in strategic design and management and is a graduate level instructor at Parsons, the New School for Design in New York City. Shawn, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Great to be here.
Perfect. Let's dive right in. What, to your mind, is innovation?
Innovation is inventing. And I think that it can be radical or it can be, call it more minor. It all depends on where you're starting from. And I think it can be organization specific. And what I mean by that is any changes that you are making to develop the product, the strategy, the process that you're involved with is innovation, even if it's been done before. Because it doesn't mean that your organization has done it before. That doesn't mean that your brand has done it before. And if you hope to innovate on the scale of the world, be judged against the state of the art, then that will be your playing field. And that's a lot harder to do. But I believe that we can innovate at whatever scale we happen to need to operate in at that time. And I think, sadly, it can be really demotivating for people who feel that it's all been done. That doesn't mean that it's been done by you. That doesn't mean it's been done by your organization. I think the opportunity always exists to innovate. And you just have to be clear as to what realm you're innovating in.
That makes a lot of sense. I really couldn't agree more with your point about even if it's been done before, innovation still exists in that realm. What makes it so important for people to understand that that is still innovation?
Look, we live in a universe driven by entropy. If it is not progressing, it is digressing, it is devolving, it is disintegrating. And so the opportunity for innovation is 100% always available to us. And it's important that we are first clear as to what realm we're innovating in. Or meant to innovate in, or intend to, or hope to. Like, for instance, Lovesac began as I'm CEO of this company, Lovesac. It began as a side hustle in my parents' basement, making giant beanbags for friends. We could not innovate against the entire furniture category at that time because we were irrelevant to the entire furniture category. Fast forward 25, 26 years now, and Lovesac is a public company. We're approaching $1 billion in sales. Still very small in terms of mega corporations and public companies, et cetera. But in the world of furniture, we're actually, I think, ranked number 20 or so in the United States. We only sell a couple of products. So We're a competitor. We have a meaningful place. And the products we bring to market absolutely are innovative, I think, at the highest level in their realm. But that wasn't the case when we started. And so I think it's important that we're very realistic about what industry or what category we're innovating against. And we find motivation and excitement in progressing our brand, our company, our product, our point of view in that realm. Otherwise, it's just too overwhelming and unmotivating against a landscape that's otherwise too big, too far out, too prolific with other innovation to feel like we're even making a dent.
Got it. So what I'm hearing is it's part understanding the domain that you kind of have the capability or the reach to innovate in. So maybe if I'm starting out, I'm not thinking about redefining the furniture category. I'm thinking about innovating a love seat and a chair and keeping that sort of scope in mind gives you the opportunity to compete.
That's right.
I hear you saying that it also might help with morale or motivation to think about, okay, we're just redefining this piece of the category. And once we do that, we can think about what's next.
Yeah. And I think that shouldn't be a downer.
Mm-hmm.
You could still have, right from the outset, lofty aspirations to change the world as we're directed to do. Every company should have a purpose, should have a big, hairy, audacious goal, to quote Jim Collins, all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be to disrupt the furniture category. Take your pick.
Right.
To do something far-reaching and meaningful in the greater world, that's fine. But as it pertains to what needs to be done today, tomorrow, next year, this year, next year, in order to continue to progress, those goals, aspirations, and desires to innovate need to be realistic and achievable and attainable and set, yes, within the confines of a domain that you choose to legitimately target. So whether that's geographic, like, hey, I'm just going to try and do this in my zip code, in my town, in my state, or whether it be industry specific or whatever. So I think innovation is absolutely relevant to the domain in which it's characterized. And it's up to you as the innovator to characterize that and then to go and achieve and to hit your goals, beat your goals, smash your goals, and use the momentum that comes from that to expand your purview of innovation going forward. As long as that's happening, I believe that's innovation. And again, even if it's been done before, music's a perfect example. Like, what song hasn't been written?
Right.
What chord progression hasn't been used? What clever turn of phrase, what rhyme hasn't been exploited? There's only so many words in the English language that even rhyme, or music without rhyming. I mean,
right.
It's all been done, yet we continue to generate as a species more and more and more music. And by the way, I can almost guarantee you, as a musician myself, that every one of those innovative, quote unquote, musicians have written 100 or 1,000 songs utilizing the same 4 chords or turns of phrases at some point leading to their big breakthrough hit or whatever that feels so innovative in order to achieve that. And so I just think it doesn't need to be 100% original in every form or fashion to be innovation, and that we should be motivated to pursue it regardless of how crowded the category, industry, landscape may seem to be.
That's well said. And music is near and dear to my heart as well. And I think it is a great field for building that analogy you're talking about, in terms of the greats in the world of jazz talk openly about stealing from each other.
Yeah.
Because if you're operating with authenticity or playing with authenticity, even if you play the same thing that someone else played, it's going to come through in a different way, in a different context, in a different form. Or maybe you take something that someone played on the trumpet and you play it on the oboe, or something someone sang and you make a line out of that for an instrument.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a great analogy. One other thing you mentioned around the domain, and it's up to the entrepreneur or the innovator to set that domain. When I think about a lot of what you hear and see as you start to build things, you get advice, you get investors who have ideas about what you should and shouldn't do that are tied to the funding that they're willing to provide. So how were you able to hold on to the right to define that scope of innovation as you grew your company? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I think that being a public company is probably perhaps the most glaring example of this, right? We are held to extremely high standards from 1,000 different constituents, 10,000 different constituents on our quarterly earnings, on many metrics, and we are scrutinized on every metric. Meanwhile, we're trying to build to a grander vision that we as management or the founders or whatever are kind of chasing after, that may run in opposition to some of those, call them interim goals or interim watermarks that we are expected to live up to in order to have the right to continue to pursue the grander vision. And so how do you reconcile that? You do both. You find a way to provide, in my case, enough EBITDA, enough profit, enough net earnings to satisfy investors' demands in the nearer term, or even in the long term, as you're pursuing the longest term goals that may be quite lofty and may be even uninteresting to those patrons who are kind of only interested in one thing, which is your stock price going up so that they can generate the wealth that they're seeking to generate off of those outcomes. And that's what I love about being a public company, is that dance. I think it's highly challenging, and it shouldn't be looked down upon necessarily, right? Like the mechanism of being able to raise capital to go pursue something comes at a cost. And you have to be willing to pay that cost. Now, there are many different ways to achieve that, right? You could somehow be independently wealthy. And then that comes with the battle against like maybe yourself and against the inherent, call it laziness or I don't know, latitude that one can afford oneself when not put under pressure of outside forces. You can raise that money in the private space through, like you said, patrons, investors, private investors, whatever. That comes at the whims of them and their wives or partners who may not like the colors you chose or the decisions you're making. That's one form of cost. Or in my case, in most extreme, perhaps the public markets that are kind of heartless and completely focused on outcomes that are often opposed to the demands of true innovation, which can take years of investment, can take a very steady hand, can take the ability to withstand the vicissitudes of whatever the macro environment's throwing at you now and tomorrow and the next day. Even as you're in pursuit of something bigger and more grand, again, that cold-hearted, results-driven investor may pursue. So then why would you choose it? Because it's real. Because it can be done as long as you're willing to recognize the game you're playing and the cost that that game demands. So I think it's really kind of cool. And I think it's something that our society has evolved the ability for people to amplify their existence and their ambitions by being able to raise money, by being able to garner support in any of the ways that I just described and many more. I mean, what an amazing scenario we find ourselves in, where like perhaps in a different age, stage, century, your ability to innovate might have been tremendously stifled by just the realities of the world at that time. So I think it shouldn't be looked down upon or whatever. I think it should be embraced and celebrated and lived up to.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that for me, all the different versions of costs that you outlined, it's so important. When I talk about innovation, I think about value and cost, right? And so when most people think about value and cost, they go to dollars. What's the interest rate? What return are they looking for? What's the time horizon? But those costs that you talked about, the allowing someone into the design process, allowing someone into an input on the decision-making process versus this cold, heartless, faceless thing that has 3 metrics. And you know what those 3 metrics are, and you know as long as they're headed north, you're fine. So I think you talked about the certainty of that versus, to me, that juxtapose it against the sort of volatile, variable types of costs that come with other forms of capital. But it also gives you the opportunity to create different kinds of value.
Yeah.
And you've talked about having a higher purpose or having a purpose tied to what you're doing and things like that. Creating value in that form also can offset some of the costs, if that makes sense, that come in other forms.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a really important thing to highlight. What you mentioned is understanding where all the costs are. Just because this person is offering you something, a loan instead of equity, or hasn't talked about when they want their money back or whatever, that doesn't make that necessarily the lowest cost choice.
Yeah. Well, we pick our costs.
Yeah.
Look, every decision we make comes at a cost. And if you perceive it as free, you just haven't thought deeply enough about what it is. And particularly if we're talking about raising money or garnering support. There's support in many different ways. You mentioned the cost or the outcome or the value of having a higher purpose. In a sick way, it's a form of compensation, right? Like I have attracted, in my humble opinion, an amazing cadre of talent to help me grow Lovesac, in particular because we are sincerely rallied around a higher purpose that attracts the sort of people who want to be part of something like that. And they could, in every case that I can think of, go find a way to leverage their tremendous resume, background, skills, and abilities to garner more money faster elsewhere. It's just the case. And they come here and share those talents, obviously, in part in pursuit of some grander outcome, some opportunity in the future through equity, whatever. But I think even more so because they want to be part of something that means something. And I think that we have structured Lovesac and our purpose and our pursuits in a way that is motivating in that way. And so there's a value, back to a cost and value. There's a value to that that can probably be measured in dollars and cents if we really wanted to go through the exercise. And the outcome can also be measured, and that will be judged most easily financially. But the question is timescale. Back to like the domain that we operate in. What is your time horizon? That's part of the domain. And in my case, there are ways right now, there are decisions I can make right now to juice our sales, to juice our profits in this year, drive our stock price up, exit, and be done if that was my motivation. And that's often the motivation of public companies under various regimes. And that's often why we see so much volatility in various brands and companies as they transition through regimes, is because it's kind of like the wealth extraction game repeating itself over and over again. And every big dip creates a big upside opportunity as well. That's just not what I'm trying to do. I've made the decision that we're trying to build something that's here for a century, a brand that really means something and that does change the landscape in innovation, in particular, in the realms that we've chosen in real products and in consumer. And so my time horizon is abnormally long. Now that's very difficult to reconcile with investors who have their own time horizons for results that they'd like to see.
Exactly.
And it's my job as CEO to juggle those things and to both attract the right investors who want to be part of what we're doing, and in some ways repel the wrong investors who might misinterpret what we're doing for something they have seen before that they can maybe find a way to make a quick buck on. This is the wrong brand to do that with.
You're not that.
Yeah. I mean, we have been that. There are times when our stock has run and created tremendous value for people who timed it right or whatever. And that will always happen in a volatile marketplace, which is, it's always a volatile marketplace.
Right.
It all depends on how you define the domain. So we've defined our domain from a time perspective, much, I think, on a longer time scale than most for various reasons.
And the natural volatility may make you look on paper like a company that you'd be able to get in quickly and harvest all that stuff. But you're saying you're not operating that way.
No, but there will always be moments, right?
Right.
In both the outside world as well as what you do and the timing of product launches, the timing of just broader investor sentiment, the timing of the markets creates both natural and unnatural volatility that will always provide wealth extraction opportunities. And I just think that public markets are the best example of that because everyone can see it. Everyone can get in or get out. And it's just extremely amplified. Private markets are a lot more invisible to those who are not living inside of them.
Right. We've been talking about domains. You connected your organization's talent to innovation as well, which is a connection I don't think people make as often as they should. Talent and org structure, reward systems. What do you pay people to do? And how do you foster the sort of mindset and behaviors among that talented group that leads them to want to innovate together? How have you thought about that? Is that an intentional thing? Have you put effort into harmonizing those pieces of your organization?
Yes, it's absolutely intentional. And ultimately, until AI eats the world, it's only about people. Like an organization is a structure made up of people. And of course, the processes and the learned behaviors and management capabilities that are somehow instilled within an organization are critical and important, particularly at scale as we're dealing with more and more people involved. But in the end, it's all about people and their motivations, particularly as you look at the higher ranks in organizations. Like the decisions made will absolutely drive the outcomes of that organization. And when I say decisions, I don't just mean big strategic decisions, but day-to-day behaviors as well.
Right, right.
And so it comes back first to being relentless about seeking out and attracting the right talent. And by the way, keeping out the wrong talent. That's part of it. It's not just about the things we do. It's just as equally important the things we don't do. Now I'm talking about not only talent and structure and process and compensation, all these things, but also now innovations in particular. Like Lovesac has essentially had the success we've had. Look, we came public in 2018 at 100 million in sales. We've 7x'd it since then in a short window and done it profitably while producing a lot of cash, et cetera. We've done that because the decisions we've made, of course, and we've had that kind of success because of the talent that's been driving those decisions. So it's all connected. At the same time, we haven't lost sight of our bigger, more far-reaching goals. And so it's all connected. And it's just being relentless. And by the way, we've created a lot of that value and those results on the back of 2 products, really. And when I say that, I'm being facetious. We innovate on these platforms, as we call them. The Sactionals platform, our couches that can be with you the rest of your life, have a ridiculous amount of innovation that continues to be layered on. But we haven't yet branched down into whole other rooms. We haven't yet branched down into whole other categories within, let's say, the furniture category. And we will. We are. It's coming. But it's all very planful. And so putting the blinders on and being willing to not chase down every whim and idea that's had. We hear them all, we collect them all, we investigate them all, and we weigh them against each other through fairly rigorous processes. And then meanwhile, sometimes you have to go years. You have to go years with the blinders a little bit on so that you don't be distracted by all of these opportunities. I think most innovative companies are more likely to choke on too much opportunity than to ever starve from the lack thereof.
That's well said. And I think it's a perspective that can only be born of direct experience. I think there's a lot to be said for getting out there into the world and trying to build something versus spending time learning principles, learning the rote elements of how to build a business, how to organize a company, and those sorts of things. The concept that there's such a thing as too many opportunities and the negative impact of that on your organization, on your decision-making process, on your talent pool, if it's not properly managed, is something that I personally would never have had an appreciation for if I hadn't tried to build something or create something. So I appreciate you highlighting that so eloquently and succinctly.
Well, by the way, I learned it the hard way.
Yeah, that's I'm sure.
Classic entrepreneur form. In the early days of Lovesac, we were trying to do all of it because we had this grand vision. We had people running down Lovesac theaters, Lovesac limos, Lovesac this, Lovesac that. We had all kinds of things spinning. Now, the truth is, all of those things were good ideas in some way or another. And by the way, many of those things will come to pass. But the sequence and the scale must be scrutinized and planned for. And in my earliest, youngest, dumbest days, I didn't understand that. And I wasted a ton of money and it caused a lot of loss for the company and for those who were participating at different times. We had to start over and reorg and do all kinds of painful, ugly things because of, again, the decisions that I had made or were allowed to be made without the rigor and discipline around them that comes from either experience or from the best books or from best examples. So our pursuit of knowledge, as you put it, our pursuit of the rote, let's call it best practices, needs to happen in parallel with our experience. I do not regret starting Lovesac as we did and just throwing ourselves into it and getting out there and doing things. But I do regret somehow not having more of that rote knowledge keep up with the scale that we experienced early on to keep us on the tracks that we found later, the tracks of discipline and the tracks of sequence and the tracks of strategic planning, that it just took better talent, more learning, more discipline, and getting kicked in the teeth by reality in order to find our way to.
No, you're right. It is a balance, and that it does have value and worth and is useful. I think what I'm hearing in your story is you got kicked in the teeth and then you understood the value of it.
Yeah.
I had a professor in engineering school. He used to say the second time you get kicked in the head by a mule is not an education. So getting kicked in the teeth, getting out there, trying something and having it blow up in your face, that's an education.
Yeah.
If you don't take advantage of it, then the second time, it's not an education. It's
just pain.
It's just pain. Exactly.
Yeah.
So we all have our different ways of being educated on the subject, but that is such a great example. It's been a great conversation. Before I let you go, I just want to make sure I ask if you have any advice for innovators.
Yeah. I mean, I wrote this book, Let Me Save You 25 Years, with the purpose of not just succinctly capturing the crazy Lovesac story, but also capturing 25 of my little Shawnisms, little pieces of advice that I learned the hard way along the way, in hopes that maybe you can learn from my mistakes and not go make them all on your own. And it's been a great book and a great podcast to go with it. Same title, Let Me Save You 25 Years. We dive deep each week on one of these topics. And I'll just wrap up with the last one in the book that I'm really proud of. It comes up, I would say, weekly, at least, in one of our Lovesac conversations today, just as we speak to our teams and continue to build something in the real world. Maintain top ambition with infinite patience. And it's a very tough one to reconcile, because for those of us that are driven, motivated, have ambition, patience can feel slow, can feel unambitious, can feel like complacency, but it's not the same. Somehow, again, maintaining our farthest reaching dreams and goals while having the patience to allow things to grow. Think of it like a garden. Like, you might have dreams of orchards and vineyards or fruitful fields, but if you can't be patient, it's never going to happen. You can't stand there and wring your hands, or, by the way, even get distracted by some other plot of land and neglect this one. Some things must gestate. Some things must be given the time to bring forth fruit. And, by the way, season after season after season becoming more plentiful. And there is no shortcut. There is no way to super speed the growth of that garden. You must allow it the time. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't find ways to utilize, we stand around and watch the plants grow. We may be able to multitask or multipath, but be careful, because all of those distractions can come at the ultimate failure of that garden that you're trying to grow. And so I think it's a sloppy metaphor, but it's the only way I can think of trying to articulate this idea of maintaining your top ambitions with the infinite patience it takes to allow things the space they need. And if you're able to figure that out, if you're able to figure out how to do that, I believe that innovation comes naturally to those of us who have ambition anyway. And that's the harder part. Man, I have just rows and rows of ideas, things that I want to do, things that we could do tomorrow, but we are now unwilling to do. We'll get there. We'll do them all. We have the patience now to allow things to grow and to cultivate that garden instead of just neglecting it and, I'll check back in 6 months. Like, that doesn't work either. So that's my best advice, is find that place where you maintain it. Don't lose your top ambition, maintain it all, but have the patience to do things well, do things right, see things through. And ultimately, I think you can achieve a lot.
Top ambition with infinite patience. That's good stuff. I love it. Shawn D. Nelson, author of Let Me Save You 25 Years, CEO and founder of Lovesac. Thank you so much for sharing your definition of innovation, being centered around inventing. And thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care. Thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to get more insights from innovators across the world. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel for additional content and conversation. I hope to see you there. Until next time, keep innovating, whatever that means.